All right, gang. So, welcome. I wanted to take the next short while just to discuss a few of the transits that I'm watching move through the zodiac. And I've been watching them for the last few years. And of course, I've been watching the political and the geopolitical events as they're unfolding. And I'm going to do my best to explain these transits and then predict out what I believe the influence of them will be over the course of the year to come. All right, so that's the nature of the discussion today. The transits at hand and the future, the prediction, the next year. I'll humbly try to give you guys a sense of what I feel this energy is going to manifest planetarily for the year ahead. And so the transits that I'm looking at that I think are most notable, remember, there's always a number of transits. Some of them are fast, some of them are slow, some of them have effects more on the individual, the personal planets, some of them have effects more on society. And so the ones that I'm focused on most here is the Uranus transit through Taurus and Saturn's transit through Aquarius. Okay, so just to cover those both, Uranus is a slow-moving planet that takes about 84 years to make its way all the way around the zodiac. And so it spends about 7 years or so in each sign. Uranus is a disruptive planet. It hates boredom. It doesn't want anything to be predictable. It exemplifies the energy of creativity, individuality, personal freedoms, unconventional thinking, non-restrictive behavior, a breakdown of any establishment, norms, or restrictions that may be placed upon one by society. It's that rebellious energy that often will shake things up in unexpected ways for the better, but you don't know the better until you arrive there. While you're going through the shakeup, it can be quite disruptive. The sign that it's moving through now, that's influencing the entire planet, is Taurus. And Taurus is the most fixed energy of the zodiac. And Taurus, being an earth energy, it represents the consistency, the structure, and the discipline of the bull. And so with regards to the second house, which is the ruling, which is where the energy of Taurus culminates, Taurus itself most notably focuses on banking or the financial system, the material space, so the physical things that we associate with, the objects in our home, perhaps the home itself, and then the food, the things that we eat. Those are the three categories that typically come to mind when you speak of Taurian energy. And so just to pull together these two energies, the transit at hand, Uranus is looking in some way or another to cause notable disruption or evolution or revolution around the events of money, materialism, and food. And once again, because it's Uranus's energy, you wind up going through a period of profound challenge, adversity, and disruption and unpredictability before you arrive at the newly intended state. What Uranus wants to usher in, the revolution. Right? You have to go through the darkness to find the light. That's classic Uranus energy, and you don't always realize when the darkness begins, and you also don't often realize how close you are to the light. It's unpredictable by its nature. And so that's the very first transit. I will also share that because it's an 84-year transit, you can look historically. It's every 80 years or so. You can look historically at how this has influenced the 80 years before and the 80 years before that, 84 years. And this transit began about 3.5 years ago. So if you wanted a similar frame of reference, keep in mind that the other transits would have been in different placements. But if you want a similar frame of reference to how Uranus shakes up the system and orients society down a different path, take 84 years, subtract 3.5 because we're halfway through the transit. So you're left with about 80.5 years. And then go back in history about 80.5 years and just take a look at what was happening planetarily about 80.5 years ago. And you'll get a sense of some of the disruptions that were underway that carried through for the next 3-4 years or so through that era. And that's where we find ourselves with the Uranus transit in Taurus. What's unique about what's happening now is that Aquarius happens to be in the mix as well, because Saturn is transiting Aquarius, and it happens to be forming a perfect square with the transit of Uranus in Taurus. Okay, and so for those of you that aren't ultra familiar with astrology, when you have a square, you have conflict, you have disruption, you have tension, you have energies that are non-harmonized, that in many ways start to create an imbalance. In some ways, they start to pull, but they don't pull perfectly apart. They pull in awkward directions. They're vying for dominance. And so if we examine what Aquarian energy is, and we understand what the Saturn transit is in Aquarius, Saturn is in domicile. It's a very strong placement when it's moving through Aquarius. And Aquarius and Uranus are actually bedfellows. It's the second ruling planet. So the energy in Taurus is supportive in many ways to the Saturn energy in Aquarius. And if you're still following me, what that means is it's an added level of intensity. It's an insane amount of intensity. And so the Aquarian energy is very comparable to what we described with Uranus. It is essentially a placement, an energy that hates boredom. It does not want to be confined. It does not want to be told what to do. It does not want to be conventional. It does not want to follow a collective consciousness. It doesn't want to be part of a mainstream. It wants to be unexpected. And when Saturn is there, Saturn is forcing the choices to be of integrity. Saturn is asking you to earn all that you have in life. So if you want a beautiful relationship, Saturn says, well, you're going to have to earn it. It's going to require integrity. Have you worked on your communication? Have you worked on trust? Have you moved yourself into a space of honesty? Right? Once again, if you want a great body and a healthy body, Saturn is asking you to earn it. Have you aligned yourself with nature's principles? Do you find yourself eating on God's diet as opposed to food made by man? Are you aligned in every which way with the vibration of the divine consciousness? These are the questions and the expectations of Saturn. Are you learning the lessons as provided to you as part of this journey? And so when we have these energies, right, the integrity of Saturn in domicile, super strong through the energy of Aquarius, the unconventional, unpredictable, unrestrained energy of Aquarius. And it's sitting in square, and a bizarre conflict energy into Uranus and Taurus. From an astrologer's perspective, it means we're about to go off a cliff. We are on the precipice of, actually, we're not even on the precipice. We're in the midst of apocalyptic energy. And I say apocalypse and people get nervous. So from the classic Greek definition of an apocalypse, the apocalypse is the revealing. The apocalypse is the unveiling. The apocalypse, as has been referred to for thousands of years, is the period in which civilization awakens to the reality of their existence. And the phenomenal influence of Aquarian energy strengthened by that Saturn transit and that Uranus energy just begging to break down the limitations within our system and society, it's combustible energy. It is a phenomenal determination, hell or high water, to bring forth into the consciousness the reality of our existence. And it's asking you these very basic, simple, profound questions. Have you awakened yet? Are you seeing things outside of the consciousness as being shoveled in your face? Have you managed to break from mainstream media? Have you managed to see through the incentives of a dysfunctional corporate environment or the incentives of an unhealthy political construct? Have you awakened to the reality of the oppression underway? Are you seeing it yet? And if you are seeing it, are you living your life in a way that reflects your awakening? That's what this energy is all about. And as far as the timing of it goes and the events as they're going to unfold. So Saturn right now and Uranus are in a near perfect square, which means that the angle is it's at a near peak. Uranus is in retrograde, Saturn is moving direct. Uranus will go direct in about a month, and then Saturn actually goes retrograde in about 6 months. What that means is that there's a degree of dysfunction. When you have a retrograde, you have distortions and dysfunction. So there's a degree of dysfunction, but because of the transit time frame, these energies will be with us throughout the year. We won't be let up on. We'll go through waves. Actually, we're going through a wave now. We're gonna have a wave of crisis or illness. We're going to have a wave of despair and devastation. We're going to have a wave of awakening and consciousness. And then it will revert back. You have another wave and it'll revert back. And it'll continue in this capacity until it reaches a crescendo. And my sense is, based on these transits, that crescendo doesn't happen until well into the year, perhaps towards the middle or the end of the summer at earliest, at which point it hits that peak moment and then it'll start to fade out a bit. And so the waves and relaxation are going to operate probably on 3 fundamental levels. The first is that I believe that the reckoning for a lot of the medicalization and the shortcuts that have been chosen, whether it's popping pills or taking injections, the unfortunate consequences of those choices, which many are now seeing more clearly, will move to a point where they're unmistakable. There will be no way for us to turn away at the devastation that choice has on our individual being as well as in our society. Okay, so that profound awakening where we learn to trust our natural immune system and to care for the sanctity of the body through the healthiest of diet and lifestyles. That moment of awakening will come for many. Some will never have it. Many will end up leaving the body, but many others will. And those that remain will carry forth this wisdom for generations to come. Okay? The second thing that I foresee happening is I think we're going to have a major disruption in the banking system, the financial system. And I believe that because there's Uranus energy in the mix, but it's in retrograde for some of this period, there's going to be a lot of darkness. Like there will be this disruption, and then it will be like this intention to replace the financial system with something else, or some type of move or motivation into something technologically more advanced that's promoted as being in our best interest. It won't be. It couldn't possibly be. But it will once again usher in a greater period of consciousness where people will start to ask profound questions and start to rebel. They'll start to resist the oppression of the more elite establishment that's pushing down upon society and indoctrinating them into an unhealthy financial replacement system or unhealthy financial belief structure. So something profound will go wrong with the financial system, and something will be proposed as this brilliant quick fix, and it'll be anything but. And that will cause a lot of suffering, and it will cause a lot of people who have identified their worth as the numbers in their bank account or the salary that they earn to ask more profound questions. That will be Saturn's doing. It will ask you what you've been doing with your life and whether or not you're aligned with your reason for being. Right? It's asking you to awaken to why you're here. And I can tell you it's not the numbers on your screen. And then the other two things that come to mind, one is we've already experienced some disruptions in the material space. I think is a byproduct of the first forecast, which is illness, but also a lot of deliberate efforts by those that control much of the system. We're going to see more breakdown in the material space. Stores will be closed. Things that we try to access won't be available. There will just be more and more disruptions in our everyday life. And the things that we've been accustomed to accumulating at will find themselves less and less available. And then the final item is, because we're talking once again Taurian energy, and there's a lot of earth energy in the mix here. Food supply. The food supply. There's going to be big disruptions, shortages, disruptions in the food supply. And once again, this is all with the hope and the desire to encourage people to turn their little gardens in their backyard and their lawns into like their own mini source of crops, to start to reconnect with the earth itself, to ask yourself more profound questions about the food that you consume and where it comes from and what's actually being done to it. It's to reorient us all to find our way back to a more divine way of living. And that will be the profound result of a lot of the awakening as it unfolds, is the connection that we have with the material space, the obsession that so many have with the financial space, the disconnect from nature's principles as it relates to our food supply, and as it relates to caring for our own physical body and caring for those around us, the way we feed our children, right? The time that we spend in nature versus the time we spend indoors, and understanding man's very natural connection with the earth. This is the apocalypse that I see forthcoming. And my hope was that the vibration of the planet would actually arrive at a place that there'd be enough consciousness to carry us into an awakened state during the last few years. That we would rebel against mandates before they took hold, that we wouldn't allow the removal of civil liberties, that we wouldn't capitulate to the whims of egotistical politicians. That was my hope. It hasn't happened. Humanity has a greater lesson that still has to be learned. And so this energy, this pulling that I've been describing, everybody's going to wind up in one side of it or the other. You already have. And those of you that are profoundly aligned, you may have lost friends and family through the process because the vibration is no longer resonating. You're not connecting with them. But the beautiful thing is that other new people who are on your frequency will end up in your space, and that will be your new community. And those that are in a darkened space, they'll actually descend further into that space. They'll have community that's also likewise darkened. And some of them will begin to awaken and perhaps try to pull the rest of them up with them. But that will be the construct that we end up experiencing. We're 3.5 years into the original transit. The secondary transit caught up more over the last 18 months or so, 16, 18 months. The two of them are going to do a profound dance now. They started this dance in 2021, and they are going to do a profound dance right through 2022. And so there is no going back. Anybody who has hopes that things will somehow revert to normal, and that if we just comply, we'll go back to the way it was, or if we just participate, then things will just be okay. It's an illusion. It's always been a falsehood and an illusion. And the sooner we all wake up is the sooner that we satisfy our reason for being, and we harmonize our state with the transits that are unfolding. And it's from there that the new earth will be born. And so I'm giving you just 1 year worth of predictive transits. And to be frank, if none of this comes to pass in the next 6 months, like no variations in the financial system, no variations in the food supply, no excess mortality, right? So no more fatalities or deaths than we would normally expect to see. If everything stays copacetic, then I will eat my words, gladly eat my words, and I will go back to my garden, happily, quietly. But my sense is that we're all going to see it very soon. The transit is not going to allow quiet. It's not going to allow calm. It doesn't want you to sit back and just expect things to be okay. It wants you to take action. And it wants you to ask profound questions. When an event happens or a mandate is decreed, ask the simple question, is this freedom? Am I more or less free than I was 2-3 years ago? Is humanity moving in the right or the wrong direction? Do I trust Big Pharma? Do I trust my politicians? And if the answer is no, why am I putting these products in my body? And why am I obeying the rules that's set forth by these politicians who only have power over me if I give it to them? Okay? Be more Aquarian, everyone. Rosa Parks is probably the example of the greatest Aquarian for these times. That sort of energy, which is something is not right and I'm not going to participate in it, and you can't tell me where I'm going to sit. Arrest me if you have to. But I'm no different from anybody else around me. Humanity is a singular consciousness. And Uranus and Saturn moving through Taurus and Aquarius, as challenging as it is right now, are asking you to come to that awakened state and start to embrace each and every person, regardless of their medical status, regardless of their belief structure. It is asking for humanity to unite and to connect with a higher consciousness and to realize that we're all in this together. And anybody who promotes some type of divisive energy is carrying you into a state of darkness. Any media source that promotes any form of fear, right? Who is constantly beating the drum of your impending doom and death is carrying you into a darkened vibration. And if you're connecting with that vibration, it's because you're already there. And the answer is to call for help and to ask to alleviate and to unload that heaviness. A bit of a rant, but it felt good. Thank you for listening. Here we go. Enlighten love, everyone. Happy New Year. Enlighten love.